This is some of the most fun I've had preparing for a podcast. Today, we happen to have two people with economics backgrounds on the podcast who both ended up in coaching. My guest is Lise Bruynooghe, ICF Master Certified Executive Coach, Chair of the International Coaching Federation Global Enterprise Board, TEDx speaker, and despite this very impressive resume, somebody that learned one of her most important career lessons, or maybe life lessons, not coaching, not in a boardroom, but in a hospital. Lise, you've reinvented yourself more times than I have listed. How did you go from working in banking to coaching executives on transformation?
Hmm. Good question, David. Thanks for asking. In a completely unexpected way. And so, if you had told me back then, when I was still in banking, one day you'll be an executive coach, I would have told you, you're completely cuckoo, you're crazy. This is never going to happen. And yet it happened. And so I guess the biggest catalyst was that we moved countries. We moved from the UK to Switzerland. And I had a job lined up and I really trusted my gut. It didn't sit well. I couldn't explain it. I didn't know why. So even though I had signed a contract and I was ready to start a few weeks later, I told them, I'm so sorry, I can't do it. And then I was sitting at home and honestly, no plan, no idea. I was completely fine with it. So, and then the phone started ringing and people were asking me, hey, Lise, we need help there. We need help here. Can are you free? And obviously I was free. I was in a new country. Kids were going to school. My husband was working. Like I was home and I had nothing to do. And so I started coaching individuals, coaching teams, facilitating sessions, doing some consultancy on the side in the beginning. And that's essentially how my business started. At the end of the year, I was like, wow, oh, actually, I am running a business without really realizing. Um, I probably would have to mention that the skill set was built a lot earlier. So while I was working at the EBRD, an international development bank, I first started as an economist, then became a banker, and at some point advisor to the president. And that president had a massive change program for the entire organization. That was the platform that he had been elected on. And I remember reading his manifesto. It was a multi-page document that he had shared with all staff. And I was reading it and I was thinking, wow, how do you change such a complex system? It's an organization that is owned by 60 plus governments and all of them want something different. So there's not an alignment like there would usually be in a for-profit company where everyone wants just more profit, more market share, more growth. That's not the case in international development banks. It's much more complex. And so I just was fascinated by it. And that's how I essentially stumbled into coaching skills. Because when I started working for the president and working on various streams of that change program, I would come to bankers and I would tell them, oh, this is so exciting. We're going to do the country strategies differently and we're going to have this product and that product. And they would look at me with a very tired kind of gaze and be like, hey, Lise, presidents come and go. I'm not going to do anything. Like, I'm going to sit this one out. And I was very junior. My background is economics, international relations, and finance. So I didn't have any human type stuff in my kind of training or backpack. And I was stuck. I was like, what do you say if someone literally crosses their arms, is like, I'm waiting this one out. And so that's how someone suggested I train as a coach. And that's how I kind of stumbled into that skill set and used that skill set like, one would use skills in now AI coding, or like one would use skills such as speaking a foreign language. It was just a skill set. I never thought it would become my full-time profession.
So you already mentioned that it was a massive organization with lots of incentives and sort of a not very predictable environment for change to happen. I think you have your personal story around this as well. How did you have to discover what's predictable and where you can have control and can't?
Yeah. So indeed, in this organization, what was quite interesting is they probably have changed it by now, right? I've left it about 7 years ago, but at the time when I was there, they had those 5-year strategic plans, that were then approved by the governments. And then based on those, we would have like other strategies around the finances, the operations, etc. But the horizon was very long. And what I do remember is the time staff spent writing those strategies. Like there was so much time spent on paperwork, on producing a beautiful paper that outlines all the great stuff we're going to do. And that, I was like, why aren't we actually doing this right now in the field? And so I came from a world of so-called waterfall planning, where you spend a lot of time planning, refining the plan, etc. And then one day, our son got a cancer diagnosis. And that's when, when you have these things in life, everything shifts from 1 second to the next. I mean, you think your life is nicely planned out and you think that, 3 weeks from now you're going on holidays or whatever. And all of a sudden, all of it evaporates, right? So everything you had planned just disappears overnight. And obviously, when you go through treatment, even though you have some visibility as to when the chemotherapy starts or which medicine you'll take at which point and for how long and which intensity, again, it shifts, because if you're sick, if you have fever, then suddenly things kind of are moved around. So I remember entering a phase of my life where, well, first of all, in the very beginning, you have no certainty of will he survive, yes or no. Luckily, we were very, very lucky and very quickly had certainty around, hey, this is probably going in the right direction. He was responding to treatment, which is fabulous news. I have many persons around me who were not as lucky. So I feel a lot for them. But what you also have is that you have simple plans like going to the cinema or going to the theater or meeting friends. And every day it was like, yes, we can meet. I have it in my calendar. However, if my son has 38 degrees temperature, I need to go to hospital. And what I don't know is, do I go there for 1 or 2 hours and then they let me go back home again, or do they keep me overnight? And that was always like, you go there and you never know, like, is it going to be a two-hour stint, quick one, out again, or do you end up stuck for 3 weeks? And to this day, I still can't, like, the smell of hospitals, I really struggle with it, because it was like a prison in a way, right? I mean, a great prison, they saved my child. So fantastic, really thankful for that. And at the same time, we spent months trapped inside this ward, not even knowing what the weather outside is, and living in a kind of parallel reality where everything is just completely disconnected from everyday life. And so that is quite, like, for me, my husband was doing quite well with that. He was much more resilient. I got very, very impacted by it, by all those nights where you don't sleep through, everything is beeping, you get interrupted all the time by all the nurses checking on the vital signs. Like, it's just quite draining. And so that taught me that, in a way, you think you control. And before, his diagnosis, I was a control freak. Like, I had 5-year plans mapped out, like, my career, how it would go, the number of kids that I wanted, like all sorts of things completely mapped out in literally, I'm French, but I was raised in Germany. So a little bit like a militaristic kind of precision that the Germans sometimes have. And that illness was so good, because it taught me, hey, this is just, it's worthless. It's a plan on paper. Highly likely it'll never happen in this way. And so it taught me to just be so much more comfortable with being in the moment. And yes, of course, you have options and you have scenarios, but having them in a very light touch, you're unattached to them. It may happen, it may not happen. You're very comfortable knowing that this is one of a million of options. So, if I think about my own life, yes, I have things I'd love to do 10 years from now, but I'm very relaxed in the sense that I may be alive. I hope so. I may not be. I just don't know. There's no way of me knowing. And having that relaxed ability to plan and not be attached to the plan is definitely something I learned there.
I remember you describing the entire hospital experience as a, quote, control freak detox camp.
Oh yes, I needed it.
So you were basically given no choice but to adapt and let go of this illusion of control. How can the average person, or maybe how can your clients, learn to do the same without having to go through it?
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot. And what specifically I've been thinking about is, do human beings need this shock of, an illness, the loss of a loved one, a divorce, losing, not having your job anymore, like those big boom moments where it shakes you up, and where you realize, either you realize, life is not going as I thought it would be, or you realize, I will die one day. Because we all will. That's the one truth that is applicable to all of us, but we like to forget it. I've always been thinking, is there a way to get someone to see that, to get someone to change without the pain that those shocks usually give us? And I don't think there is. Like, for some very, very wise people, maybe. But for most people, me included, you need the shock, because otherwise it's just, it's much more comfortable to not see. That there's a term of willful blindness. There are many, many things we don't want to see, because it's just more convenient and more comfortable. And we like comfort. You have those beautiful pictures of beautiful bodies behind your head. It takes work to get to that body, right? And very few people want to do the work. And so if I can just be on my sofa and have my nice cup of tea, or I need to exercise like hell for several hours, well, yeah. And so you need something that propels you into that kind of choice. It's a little bit like, I have people who know technically what is good for them in terms of food, in terms of exercise, etc. But they will only get moving once they have a medical diagnosis telling them that really they have to. They will not move beforehand. I'd love to have a shortcut. I personally haven't found one. So with all my clients, there needs to be a tough moment that will then make them come, for example, to coaching, because coaching is not comfortable. It's like any physical fitness. It requires discomfort. It requires the openness to be challenged, the openness to see things about yourself that you don't want to see, that you'd rather ignore. And so very few people will come to you just because they want to be better, without any kind of event that made them see that it's really important.
This happens to me all the time as well, that I have people asking about how they can get their relatives on board, or how they can help other people, and I always just tell them that the person needs to be in enough pain to take action, and until then there's nothing they can do.
Yeah.
How do you help these people after they go through that pain? Because they go through some sort of pain, then they seek you out. How can you help them? How can you pass on to them what you learned about predictability, control, and these complex systems?
So in my trade, there is a word, it's called use of self. And it's the notion that you are the instrument. So that if you want to speak in words that are understandable to people who are not in the field of coaching, it's really this idea of role modeling. And so if I role model my comfort with uncertainty, if I role model my comfort with the fact that we'll all die, if I role model all of this, then it makes it easier for someone who's with me to kind of see, this is actually possible. It's a little bit like, if I give you an example, if someone comes to me and they're not good with boundaries, then I'll make an extremely conscious effort to be very, very strong on my boundaries with them. Again, to role model it. And again, then to look in the relationship between them and me. How does it feel when you experience someone setting strong boundaries? Because that's what it's here for. The relationship is where you learn. So if I'm very strong on my boundaries with you, do you feel uncomfortable? Interesting. Where's this discomfort coming from? And if you were very strong setting boundaries with me, how would I feel? And so we can play with it. It's really this notion of play, of experimenting, but of really being what is lacking. So what people really want, to really give them that. And I think the other thing that's important is that I'm different with every client, because obviously every person needs something different. So someone may be super strong on the boundaries and maybe they want to be softer. So then I'll obviously be a lot softer. So it's this idea of role modeling, and then obviously pointing out every time. Just yesterday, I was in a group session and it was someone who was extremely harsh on themselves, so harsh. And every time they would judge themselves really harshly, I would interrupt them. And I would be like, ha, here you did it again. Ha, here again. And sometimes I would let a few things go because otherwise I was interrupting her nonstop. But I was like, okay, I've let three things slip right now. Now I'm interrupting again. And there were three I ignored. And that helps the awareness. I think a lot of the stuff that holds us back is very often a little bit unconscious, and so it helps to have someone with you who knows where you want to go and who's going to point it out every time you do it.
So you wrote somewhere that, quote, most people are disconnected from their bodies. A significant part of my work is helping you reconnect so you can access a broader form of intelligence, which ties in with this awareness that you just mentioned. When you take people out to nature, is that part of helping them reconnect with themselves? And what do you mean by this broader form of intelligence? Do you mean just like listening to your body, or can we even maybe call it intuition?
Yes, definitely both. And so a lot of my clients are high performers in the sense that, you look at their CVs, it's fantastic. It's often highly impressive, and they're very strong cognitively. So this part, the head, is like so strong, analytical, super smart, go-getters, you name it. And so in nature, a lot of the work is to help them reconnect to their intuition, for example, because sometimes we're stuck in a decision and because we're so smart, you can analyze it and you can be like, yeah, you should do it because and you list all the reasons. No, you shouldn't do it because and you have an equally impressive and kind of list of reasons. And so you're stuck. You're like, oh, what should I believe? And very often when you manage to get away from the cognitive piece into how does it feel? Do I feel excited? Do I feel anxious? Do I feel tense somewhere? Then you can access some other data points. So for example, if someone talks, and when they talk, I remember one guy, a CEO, who came to me and he's talking about, what he wants to do next. And he tells me, yeah, it'd be great to be an investor and to a board member as well. And to go on the speaking conference circuit, kind of share the story. And the way he says that, like the voice is flat, no, and I'm like, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. Like, this is not what you want. This is something that a lot of CEOs do when they stop being CEOs. That's the usual pathway. Like, they become board members, they become, angel investors, and they go and do speeches. Absolutely. But that's not what you want. And so that's using, the body, the voice, the kind of spark in the eye, if someone is like this or really upright, or like everything, like all the data that you can get from looking at someone. And if you are with them, then also being with them, right? We feel the energy of a person. And so that playing that back helps them get awareness. My supervisor did it recently with me. We were looking at various options for my business. And he was like, and I had to sit in different chairs. So physical, different locations, right? And one, he's like, no, you're frowning. I hadn't even started talking. I was starting to explain the option. He cuts me off. He's like, yeah, you're frowning. The other option, he's like, yeah, heavy sigh. So, it's like, it's quick. It just cuts through everything. And it allows you extremely quickly to know, is it a yes or is it a no? And that's why I use it so much, because we can't bullshit ourselves. If we listen to the heavy sigh, the kind of feeling that may come, or the little hesitation before we speak, and then we can look at all of this. The nature piece combines an additional level, if you want, so you have the physical exhaustion that sometimes can be really good. Like if you walk uphill at a very fast pace, at some point you have to focus on your breathing and probably on where you step so that you don't fall. And so it switches this part off, and it allows you to really access your intuition much better. And so that's part of why I use nature. I had one client, I remember, we had a massive walk, the longest I ever took with anyone. And also I never went that pathway again with any other client to date. It was one with ropes and climbing and all sorts of crazy stuff, because she was so much in her head and so like under so much pressure. She was walking so fast. And the second time she came to me, we probably walked, I don't know, 200 meters flat by the lake, because she didn't need any of that anymore. She knew exactly how to access her body, how to access her intelligence. She just needed me to be there to, hold her and give a bit give her some feedback as to what I see and what I'm sensing. But we didn't need to go through the whole breaking down of defense mechanisms before being able to access what she truly is. So it's a mix of getting past the mask, if you want, the successful self we present to the external world. Like, I'm not interested in that. I'm your coach. So I want to see the real you, right? And then so once I see the real you, sometimes you don't even need the physical kind of exhaustion anymore, because you can go right to it.
In order to be able to listen to your body, other than getting past this mask that you mentioned, I think a certain level of either chilling out or just quieting the monkey mind is also required, right? But I find that a lot of people are unable to listen to their bodies because they're stuck in this survival mode, either due to psychological health, like a trauma history, or just repeating patterns, or due to physiological health issues, where I mostly just mean digestive or hormonal issues. What are your thoughts on health, overall health, getting into the way of intuition?
So I've had that conversation with a friend of mine who's a yoga teacher. And she's also a healer, like a practitioner, does all sorts of various methodologies there. And she told me that the number of people able to access their bodies, to feel their bodies, is really decreasing. She was worried about that trend. And I'm seeing that too. A lot of people being quite lost, like, oh, how do I do this? If I ask them, like, do you feel any tension anywhere? They're like, not sure. What is it? Like, how do I? And so sometimes it is also just helping them reconnect with it in a very slow way. So it would be by mirroring quite a lot, So I would be like, oh, can you see you just frowned? Or can you see, do you notice you just slumped? Can you notice you just went upright? And so I would point it out until they're able to notice it themselves. And so it's really this, a little bit like when you learn a new language and someone corrects every grammar mistake you make, or I don't know exactly what the metaphor would be, but it's a learning process together. But they have to want it. So you said, so sometimes it's trauma. So sometimes, yes, there are issues or topics or history that someone will bring that makes it quite dangerous to work with a body, because it is a protection mechanism, rightly so. And so this one we should not touch. So sometimes I would have a session with someone and they tell me, no, I don't want to go there. And that's absolutely fine. Then, then we don't go there. Because you don't want to poke a kind of sleeping giant. And there again, you then have the boundaries between coaching and psychotherapy, etc. Quite a few of my clients are also either have seen a psychotherapist or are in psychotherapy in addition to the coaching. So that can be quite useful, because sometimes we notice something and I'm like, okay, bring this to your psychotherapy session. This is important. We just uncovered something. I'm not going to work with you on this, but discuss this with your psychotherapist. So you can do referrals like that, and kind of play ball with other mental health practitioners. One thing I do have is I do have a very thorough grounding in psychotherapy. I trained many years with various teachers, and so there are certain things where I can go there myself. But I would always hand over if I feel that this goes beyond what I can do.
That makes sense, and I can really see how you can discover certain patterns that you can just take to an actual therapist during coaching. And regarding physical health, because this was mostly about mental health, right? Do you see any correlation between physical health and executive performance? Because I just find that a bunch of people sign up with me, and we obviously advertise these pictures because it's the easiest sort of gauge of all the subjective metrics that improve throughout their transformation. But ultimately, whenever they clear out all these potentially hormonal, potentially digestive issues, pretty much everything else improves as well. Their energy, their cognition, how much they get done. What do you think?
I would be fully with you on that one. Because obviously we all know sleep impacts performance, your bodily health impacts performance. If your digestion is better, you have more energy. You also have more confidence, I would think, if you have a nice, beautiful body than if you don't. So the confidence probably makes you a better public speaker. Like, like there are many knock-on effects. And I had a client of mine, she's a CEO, a yoga fan. So she would be on her yoga mat every morning and in the evening, and flowing and doing her vinyasa and like all those nice flowy things. And then she took up boxing, and she became much more assertive in her leadership. So I find there is a link. Again, I didn't, do research studies on that, but with my clients, I can see a link between some of their hobbies and activities and how they then show up in life and the confidence it gives them. There's also a link I find more generally around setting yourself a pretty impressive kind of target, such as, I'm going to train, I'm going to be fit, I'm going to improve my bodily shape, and etc. And then reaching that target. There's something there. A confidence grows out of this. And so then very often you would have thinking like, well, if I manage to do that, then surely this thing is nothing, right? So it resets how you calibrate what is possible and what is impossible. And so, yes, absolutely, it has a lot of knock-on effects.
Yeah, so I actually find that's a good point, that often the physical goals are a little bit easier to achieve than the rest of them, but it's like the catalyst to actually achieving those, or the first domino, basically.
Yeah.
So we talked a bit about intuition, and today, obviously, data is super cool. How do you get people to buy into the intuition idea and to listening to their bodies? Where now that we were talking, intuition to me just sounds like pattern recognition without knowing exactly what the inputs are.
Yeah.
But for these people, these high achievers, it's often like the most unsexy, soft, potentially not very objective thing. How do you make them buy into this whole idea?
I've never had to explain it. I like the way you explain it. It is pattern recognition. Our body is extremely good at that. Like, there are certain different intelligences, if you want. And sometimes, at least, and again, there are studies on that, our body knows a lot, picks up on a lot of signals and processes them, sometimes a lot faster than our cognitive brain can. And so in hindsight, we're like, yeah, that's why. But in the moment, there are certain parts in us that are faster, which is why we have a good feeling or a bad feeling about something. I've never had to explain it. If I had to explain it, I would probably explain it in the way you did, talking about pattern recognition and just saying that this is a slightly faster processing and that the mind hasn't quite caught up with it and not had the time to kind of build a story around it. But the people I work with, they get it. And they use it, and they see the result, and then they're like, wow, this is fantastic. I want more of that. And so it's more around trusting themselves. I think we outsource a lot of our authority to others, and to models. So, I have quite a few people, especially in the beginning. I remember one person who was like, oh, I need tools. I need a toolkit. I need a model. I'm like, yeah, sure. You'll get it. At the end of the session, happy to share whatever books and toolkits, etc. you want, just to appease, to make sure that, okay, I feel okay because I'm going to get what I want. But I knew she didn't need any of that. And at the end, it was funny because then she started laughing and she said, gosh, I remember how I asked you for all those tools. Now I see I don't need it. Because she had confidence in herself and trust in herself. And she knew that she had what it takes to actually do whatever she wanted to do. And so for me, the work is more around that, to get people to that place where they are much more aware of all the resources they already have within themselves. And if there's a gap, then obviously you have a plan for how to fix that gap, who to reach out to, which expert, which people you already know, or you may need to get to know to actually fix the gap. But there's, this self-trust and a very strong plan to fix whatever is still missing in the bigger picture. So far, I didn't have anyone question the intuition piece because they've seen the value of it.
You didn't see any issues, and people you work with just get the overall concept of it. Do you think it's something that you pre-select for, that you filter these people out in initial consultations, that you wouldn't sit with that idea? Or
yeah, so I think there probably is a pre-selection in the type of content I put out there. Obviously, I'm publishing on LinkedIn quite a bit. And on a few other social media channels. So people, before they reach out to me, they will have, watched some podcasts, watched some videos on LinkedIn. If they don't connect to that idea, I mean, not all, but the majority of my videos are done out there in nature. I'm walking outdoors, and then I'm explaining a few things. So if you don't connect with it, you book someone else. And so, yes, I would agree with you. There probably is a pre-selection. That happens by default. You would probably also need to connect with the texts on my website. Again, I didn't draft them to exclude, but there is probably somewhere implicitly a notion of trusting yourself. And if someone is not ready to trust themselves, and they prefer to have, a framework and toolkits and step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then they will go to a coach who will give them the step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So there definitely is some pre-selection, just not necessarily conscious or intended by you. You mentioned outsourcing earlier, which probably has gotten much worse recently with AI, right? People are just trying to outsource. Well, now we don't even think for ourselves, let alone feeling. But I think that gives you a very defensible position in terms of how your service differs from AI by focusing on intuition and connecting other dots that AI will probably not for quite a long time be able to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I do think that we call it transactional coaching and transformational coaching. So the transactional coaching, like step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that can be done beautifully by AI because it's just a model, right? It's applying something, so you can feed the models into AI and they will tell you exactly, what to do first and second. What's more difficult is really the transformational coaching, where you don't coach on the what will I do, what are the steps, what do I need to learn, but you coach on the who am I, what do I believe, how is this belief maybe getting in the way of me becoming someone different. And so this is something that requires to go beyond what you present, the mask that you present to the world. If I chat with my chatbot, I'm still in my presenting self. I'm unlikely to share my deepest fears or my deepest insecurities because I may not be honest about it myself either. So I may need someone to show that, hey, when you share this, I feel really, really sad. Is there any sadness in you? And then you're like, no. And then you think a little bit and you're like, oh, yes, actually there is. And you start to connect the dots. And that's something where AI for now is not, not there yet. You need a human to be able to connect with you and feel with you at that level, and show you certain things and allow you to connect certain dots, that alone you did not connect to the state.
I want to steer back to the control and predictability topic for a second, because I have this very particular problem that often some of the smartest people that we deal with, they kind of, I cannot conceptualize it well enough, but they just can't see the forest from the tree. I feel like they're super smart, and they think that they can figure out anything, however random or unpredictable the system is. And these people, because of how smart they are less likely to buy into ideas, and they are much harder to help. How do you help these people anyway?
Well, first of all, they would have to come to me, right? So I had someone yesterday in a group session, really interesting. So group session, and it's not even coaching, it's me facilitating. So there, I just let it be, but I observed it. And she was crying, and she says, "Oh, this has nothing to do with my identity being challenged." She says this. And then, two sentences later, she says, "But this job is who I am." I'm like, huh? Like, you're contradicting yourself, right? And so if she were my coaching client and we have contracted for coaching, I'd be like, you just contradicted yourself. What is it? Like, and so I would challenge the person quite hard. And this is with the type of persons you've kind of described. Very often there's a certain arrogance that comes of, hey, I'm so good, I've made it thus far, I have so much success, so of course I can solve any issue. And as my supervisor would say, it takes one to see one. So of course I'm arrogant myself too, and I'm guilty of it at times. And then I'm like, oh shit, that was pretty arrogant of me. And so we can only see things that are within ourselves in others, right? So you need to do a lot of self-development work and challenge yourself really, really deeply to be able to see all the shadow side, all the shitty sides about yourself in others. So it is a very human thing to do, to think that yes, you can solve everything. There's a sense of omnipotence that even goes with it. I'm like, oh, but if you have a coach who has done enough self-work on themselves, who has been critical in a loving way towards themselves, then they can point it out. So I would point it out. I would be like, wow, that's a pretty big ego getting in the way. Oh, lots of arrogance. Oh, a sense of omnipotence here, because I've done the work on myself too. And so then you can observe it, and you can point out the contradictions. You can be like, okay, you came to me for this, and yet you tell me you can solve it yourself. Well, why are you here? You're wasting my time, you're wasting your time. To give you another example, a slightly different take, but yesterday I was talking with two co-CEOs and co-founders, and they were fundraising in Switzerland for their startup. And they tell me about a particular problem that they have in the company. And I'm like, hey, this is the third time you mentioned this problem. You're not wanting to solve this. Like, this is what you need to do. And so jokingly, I said, you're wasting your time and you're wasting the money you invested in being with me as your coach. I don't know what else I need to do. And so I told them, if you want, I can double my fee. But it needs, the pain needs to increase for you to actually act on it. And so sometimes you bring in humor, and you kind of confront in a loving way, but still telling them, hey, this problem is not going away. You need to address it. And if you bring it to me a fourth time, it's just that you're too scared to have that uncomfortable conversation. So go and do it. And then, of course, we can have some coaching around, okay, how do we address it? How do we have that uncomfortable conversation? How do we manage to do this in a way that's professional and constructive and doesn't, leave massive destruction in its wake? This is all stuff that we can then coach on. But yes, so that would be my answer to your question.
Do you know this quote is one of my favorites? It goes, "It's ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so."
Yes.
It's so good, right?
Yeah, and I love, so that links to perspective, which is a lot of the work that I do with people is the perspective. You know, people and all of us. I mean, sometimes we're like, this is how it is. This is the world, you know. And you're like, yeah, but what if it was differently? And I love Byron Katie's The Work, which is, you know, four super simple questions and one turnaround. It's like, is it true? Is it absolutely true? Like, can I know for sure this is true? If I, you know, and then who am I when I believe this thought, and who would I be without this thought? And my favorite is the turnaround. So, you know, if I say she's stupid, sometimes when people have, you know, conflicts at work or wherever, like, oh, my boss is toxic. Well, and then you turn it around. I am toxic, you know, like, okay. And so then you start thinking, oh, in which ways am I toxic? And you will come up with stuff where you are toxic. And so it just shifts the perspective in a very structured and playful way. And that is one of the big part of the work of what I do, because very often we're stuck in our position, and actually there's so many ways to look at a situation, and being aware of that and really being in that position of not knowing, of curiosity, of what am I missing, what else is happening here that I'm not seeing. And that obviously also brings in the systemic, right? So going beyond just you, looking at you and the team, you and the organization, you and society, and then how all these things shape you and influence you.
And regarding just perspective and what people are missing, from one of your videos, maybe what really stuck with me was when you said that in the 1950s, the S&P 500's average company life expectancy was about 60 years. It was like 61 or something. And by the 2010s, this went down to about 20 years. And now 10 years later, it's estimated just under 15 years. So the whole unpredictability and all the blind spots, the rate of it is just increasing as opposed to decreasing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a statistic. Yes, I share that in my TEDx talk. And it is so impressive because we tend to think, right, that things will always stay as they are. That's, you know, the way we're wired. And then when you look at the data points, you're like, oh no, it's changing so much faster. And obviously with technology right now and with climate change, both of them being on an exponential curve, this is just accelerating far beyond what we can imagine, which is pretty scary at times as well. Yeah.
And I never had an actual job, but I would assume these are like obviously massive companies with entire departments that are dedicating themselves to making the company survive. So if they can miss things, then probably us as individuals are able to miss certain things as well.
Absolutely.
I wanted to play a mini game with you called Fad or Future. So I'm going to list a few things, and I would like your opinion on whether you think these things help leaders avoid burnout and make better decisions and navigate change, or they just give them a false sense of control and yet another data point to obsess over. So
Okay.
if it's something useful
Let's
for them,
try.
that's future. If it's something to obsess over, it's just fad.
Mhm.
Wearable devices.
Oof. Oh God, it's both, David. And I'm so much both and. I've seen some leaders who are like, gosh, since I started, you know, coaching with you, all my data is in the green. I'm like, yes, great. You know, so for some, it helps them monitor their sleep, monitor their energy, change their behavior. One leader was like, oh, every time I have this kind of event, I'm in the red. Okay, what do I need to change? And so they change things around that. So there, I think it's super useful. And at the same time, and I had this conversation with some clients of mine as well, sometimes it gives you like everything is green, but you still feel off. So obviously something is not being tracked. That's one option. And also then the stress of living a hyper optimized life. I'm French. I love red wine. And you know, and right now I barely drink because I know it's not healthy and it's not good for you. But then I have this debate, like, okay, is my life enjoyable if I don't drink wine? And actually, no, I like drinking wine. So it's this. If I had a wearable device, it would tell me that my sleep quality is less. That, you know, a lot of markers are really being impacted, and then it's a question around, okay, how much do you want to optimize your life versus how much do you want to enjoy it. And sometimes it goes hand in hand, like a quinoa bowl is healthy and I enjoy it, so fine, no problem there. But sometimes there are areas where it's problematic, but you still love it.
Cold exposure / ice bath.
What's the cold exposure?
Any sort of freezing yourself. Ice bath is one form of cold exposure.
Yeah, so ice bath, I know, and I think the benefits are very well documented. So I'd say that's future.
Psychedelics.
Very strongly debated with a book recently that came out from someone who's, I think, at Harvard Business School and a few other like top universities who tried it on himself. But I haven't yet read his book. So on this one, I have to defer until I read about his experiment.
That's awesome that he tried it on himself as well.
Yeah.
Cardio or a baseline activity?
What is the base? So cardio baseline, absolutely, it's a must. Yeah.
Being offline.
Very nice from time to time. I think we need it. My way of doing that is I always leave for multi-day cycling trips, like a week, 2 weeks, thousands of kilometers, and also multi-day hiking trips. And then, that's it. You just, you're outside all day, you exercise, you move all day, and that's the best.
And you don't bring your phone, or you just end up in places where you don't have coverage?
So usually I end up in places where I don't have coverage.
Okay.
And if I have it, then I just use it for navigation, but the rest I ignore. I actively ignore.
Work-life balance.
I've never believed in it. I think it's not a good word as such. And the English language doesn't have this word, but the German language does. In the German language, it's called Lebenswerk, which translated into English would be life work. And it's, when they do an artist retrospective, say they look at the life of Van Gogh, and then they would tell you, this is his early work, and this is what he did, and this is, the work just before he died. And you see the evolution of the artist. And sometimes some started with drawings, and then they moved to watercolors, and then they do sculpture. For me, this is what life is about. And so the life and work, it's together. What is it that you create? And so you may create, if you're a housewife, you may create a beautiful family, or if you're a houseman, a beautiful family, and maybe a nice home that feels cozy and where people like to visit and they feel they can relax and unwind. If you have a career, then you create, potentially, if you're a founder, you create a fantastic company, you create employment for a lot of people, you may create beautiful services and products, but it's all of this being intertwined. For me, it belongs together.
I have a few rapid fire questions to finish with. A book everyone should read.
So for everyone, one I find really accessible, and I have it here, is, let me grab it. It's this one. It's The Gift by Edith Eger. So she's a Holocaust survivor, and she started writing in her 90s, which I find impressive by definition. And it's a very simple book sharing her story. And also, obviously, she became a psychotherapist, which is not surprising given what she went through. And so she shares story from her psychotherapy clients and her own life. And it's very accessible, very easy read, very profound. So that's one that is certainly for everyone.
Thank you. A thing under 100 pounds. Swiss francs, whatever, that you cannot live without?
Oh, my teapot.
Do you have an excessive tea intake along with your walks?
In winter, yes.
For warmth or for performance or for pleasure?
For warmth and pleasure.
Okay. Do you have a favorite quote?
It's not a quote per se, but it's something my coach said to me. And he recently said to me, so Michael Serwa, you had him on your podcast as well. And he said to me, if there's a doubt, there's no doubt. And
that's good.
I've been applying that to many areas of my life, and it works very well.
A Michael Serwa quote to finish well. What does your I know you said in the beginning that you used to have everything planned out and now not so much, but ideally, what would your life look like 5 years from now? A day in your life.
Yeah. So 5 years is pretty easy still because you see, I've got 3 kids. And 5 years from now, my youngest will be in his last year of school before he finishes. So I know I still be living here. So it's very stable. If you ask me 6 years from now, then I'm like, I've got no clue. Because I think when you have children and if you have a good relationship with them, being close to them is something that is kind of high on the list. And I've got no idea who they will fall in love with. Will they end up living in Argentina, Japan, or Australia, or will they stay in Switzerland? I don't know. And so the way I've built my business is that it is location agnostic. This is a design principle for me because so far in my life, I've moved countries roughly every 10 years. So 5 years from now, I will have completed 10 years of Switzerland. And so I may very well uproot myself again and go somewhere crazy that I can't yet know. And maybe it's because, I don't know, my eldest son has his first grandkid and that I need to care for him, right? So no idea. 6 years from now, I may be somewhere in the world and I'm building everything in a way that I don't have any business constraints holding me back.
A thought constantly on your mind nowadays.
How lucky I am to be living in a country that is, democratic, that is safe, that has no war going on. Very strong thankfulness and care and thinking for everyone who's not in that lucky position.
Thank you very much. Where can people find you?
So my website would probably be the best piece. So you would need that somewhere in writing because no one will remember my first and last name. So it's lisebruynooghe.com. That's probably the best place to start. And then the usual social media channels.
And I think you also have a book coming, potentially?
You're right. Leading in a World We Can't Control is the working title at the moment. I will see whether that evolves or not. And that will probably be out in the next few months, yes.
Oh, wow. Exciting. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, David.